Hi, guys. Happy Thursday. I haven't seen you guys in a while and I haven't been on live, but hopefully you're okay. If this is your first time joining in on TXC Tells All, welcome. Today's video is because we do so many videos on student loans. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the recent halts on the student loan forgiveness. I wanted to come on here and give some information, do some fact checking about what's going on and what a predicted possible outcome is for it. So if you are on the live, check in the chat box, say hi, and we're gonna jump right into it. If you're new to the channel, I'm Larita. I'm an attorney, and we talk about a lot of things, but we do have a everything student loan playlist where I talk about how to get loan forgiveness under the public service loan forgiveness if you are a government worker or a nonprofit worker. And then we also talk about just the recent loan forgiveness that President Biden offered in August of 2022. So this video focuses on the latter, right? Everybody submitted their application to have their loans forgiven. Everybody thought everything was going to get rolling, and then bam, we get smack hit with lawsuits popping up everywhere. And now what's going to happen with the actual forgiveness program? So I'm going to share my screen with you because I'm going to remind you guys, if you weren't already familiar, I'm sure you are, but what President Biden previously offered, and then to show you kind of like what was wrong with it and program that is it unconstitutional, is it illegal, and what we can predict the Supreme Court is going to do in this particular situation. So let's watch this short video. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this is when he talks about the original forgiveness program.
For president, I made a commitment. I made a commitment that would provide student debt relief, and I'm honoring that commitment today. Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education, we will forgive $10,000 in outstanding federal student loans. In addition, students who come from low-income families, which allow them to qualify to receive a Pell Grant, will have their debt reduced to $20,000. If you make under 100.
All right, I'm going to draw back a little bit because the subject of some of why they're saying that the student loan program is illegal is focusing partly on Biden overstepped his boundaries as what is allotted to an executive in the executive branch, what they're like to do. Saying, and I'll go back so you can hear it again.
$1,000. And I'm honoring that commitment today. Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education.
He's basing his authority to do the program on the authority that Congress grants the Department of Education. So here's a little civics lesson, right, to start you off. In the United States government, there are three branches of the government. We have legislative, executive, and judicial, right? So legislative is the branch that makes the laws. Executive is the branch that enforces the laws, and judicial branch is the one that interprets the law, right? Every branch has separate powers, and it was designed with the founding fathers in mind, saying like no branch, no one person, no entity should have so much power. They had some, overwhelming anxiety from the whole British situation, right? So that's why it's designed that way. What the proponents of making sure that student loan forgiveness is not implemented is saying that Biden overstepped his boundaries by saying that Biden didn't have the permission as an executive branch member to forgive loans. Congress says how federal dollars should be spent. Biden is not in charge of it. But as he mentioned in the first part of his message when he announced the forgiveness, he's saying he has the authority under what Congress gave to the Department of Education. Department of Education is under the purview of the executive branch, right? It's one of the federal agencies, and they report to the president. I've worked in 2 out of 3 branches of the federal government. I worked in executive branch, and I worked in the judicial branch. And I haven't worked in legislative where they basically make the laws and say where money goes, but I can understand the criticism of it. Even when he first when he was campaigning for president, he was basically saying he was going to get the student loan, some kind of loan forgiveness, and he was saying he didn't know if he had the authority to do so. Obviously, he had his people look into that and then came back and had the answer, right? But I'm going to share my screen with you because back in August when this all happened, Time Magazine did an article about fact-checking criticisms of Biden's student loan forgiveness program. People had already had some questions about it, whether, there are a lot of questions about it. But I'm going to scroll down to the part where it says, let's see, it's an abuse of executive power. So the argument is beyond the merits of the proposal, there's a debate about whether such a move was within Biden's scope of authority, and the plan is expected to face legal challenges in the court. This article is written back in August. So this is before the 1965 Higher Education Act grants the president the power to cancel student loans, but the question is whether he can do so on such a sweeping level or whether it's limited to more targeted relief. What do you think about it in the vote in the comment section? Let me know what you think. Do you think that this is illegal? Do you think he overstepped his boundaries? On what basis? Right now, the issue before the Supreme Court is actually not the merits of the case. One of the states, there are a lot of conservative states that are filing lawsuits saying that it does, they have standing to file President Biden's loan forgiveness, deprives companies in their particular state of profits. And right now, one of the states, I believe it's Missouri, is an injunction from the Eighth Circuit saying that they can't actually implement the student loan forgiveness. And so that is the actual issue before the Supreme Court now, not whether the actual forgiveness program is illegal, whether the injunction that the Eighth Circuit put in place that basically barred any forgiveness, if that is illegal or not. So you guys, one of the people, were you one of the people that thought that you were going to get your loans forgiven and now you're like sitting here saying like, what's going on? I think that things going on, right? So I think that because of all this stuff going on, that's why President Biden extended the student loan payment pause. Is extended until June of next year or earlier, 60 days after whatever the Supreme Court makes a decision about this injunction issue, right? So it's giving people time to kind of get it together, because if they make people start paying and they didn't need to start paying it in January, if the loans have been forgiven, it's like it doesn't put them in a position that they would have otherwise been able to be in if they forgave the loans. So it put people, gave people an extra break because they're trying to see if they're going to get the loan forgiven, whether it's $10,000 or up to $20,000 for some people. Let me check in with our chat box. Hi, Dad, Free Dad. Hey, Marcus. I don't know. I'm gonna lean towards it is illegal. Okay. So Dad, Free Dad is also another attorney. What's your basis, sir? We're gonna always ask what's your basis for thinking it's illegal. The reason I'm not, like I said, the issue before the Supreme Court right now is not the merits of whether the student loan forgiveness is illegal. Right now, it's just an injunction. But the merits of the actual program could be before the Supreme Court eventually. And what will they decide? This goes back to also what I was saying to you guys about in other videos about voting and why it's important to know, like, when you're voting for somebody, you're not just voting for the person that's running for office, especially the president. You're also voting for those people that they can actually nominate. So as the president of the United States, they are able to nominate the judges, the Supreme Court judges, right? And depending on which way they sway, they'll nominate those particular judges. So right now we have quite a few conservative Supreme Court justices in the Supreme Court that were nominated by Trump and other Republican-based presidents, right? So when issues like this become before the Supreme Court and you're wondering which way is going to fall, now you're left with the people that she voted for, not just Trump, but the people who he nominated as justices, and which way they're going to lean on this issue. Conservative justices lean on the issue of very strict interpretation of the law, whether Biden has authority as a president to issue executive orders. He didn't do it under this particular authority. He did it under the authority that he says Congress gave Department of Education, right? So he went about it that way. But whether the Supreme Court justices would say, okay, based on the strict interpretation of the Constitution, presidents do not have the authority to spend federal money. forgiving these student loans, in essence, it's almost spending money because they're basically accounting for millions of dollars of money that now do not need to be paid to these student loan services, right? So I'm wondering how they're going to lean. Debt-free debt may be correct in saying that they might, if the Supreme Court justice comes to the merits of it, they might find it legal. That's not the issue, like I said, before the court right now. The issue is the injunction and whether there's actually harm being done to the particular states that have filed the lawsuits, saying that the companies are gonna be deprived of profit. One of the companies, Mohela, which is actually a loan servicer, my current loan servicer says they're like, we don't have nothing to do with that. That's what basically they're saying. Loan company distances itself from GOP-led states' student debt suit. They're saying like, yes, although they are part of one of the states, and Mohela is kind of a quasi-state entity, they're saying like, we had nothing to do with these particular states moving the file suit to say that their revenue is threatened as a result of Biden's forgiveness. Mohela's like, no, we don't have anything our job is to process student loans. We don't want to have anything to do with it. So we'll see what comes about that. But they're basically saying like, I don't want anything to do. What do you guys think about it? If you're hopping in now, comment in the comment box and let me know what you think. Do you think on the merits, do you think that the student loan program is illegal? And then secondary, what do you think the Supreme Court is going to do in February when they hear oral arguments about the issue about the injunction dealing with whether the federal government should be enjoined, meaning stopped from actually implementing the student loan forgiveness that would affect 36 million people? So let me check out the comment section. Hi, Paul Raines. I don't pay for it. I avoided debt when I went to school. Okay, so Paul's one of those people that think that because he didn't have debt that, this should not benefit other people. I've heard this argument before, Paul, and it's almost as if it doesn't consider that some people didn't have that option, and having it available to the people that could make a difference between them not having any debt because they were forced to. I don't know what year you went to school, Paul, but having that stand in the way of them being able to move on in life, or paying on debts they've been paying for years, because some people, it's not a new debt. This is a debt that they've been paying on, and the interest is so astronomical that they can't actually get ahead. So I don't think it's a matter of them trying to avoid actually their obligations. It's a matter of saying, listen, we've paid this debt 5 times over. It's almost predatory lending in the sense that we'll never get out of it. So I can understand Paul Raines' position, because that he is not alone in that position, but also what harm does it do to you if someone has their loans forgiven, right? Does it hurt you? Actually, if somebody gets their loans forgiven? No, it doesn't help you because you said you avoided that, but does it hurt you? What I wouldn't necessarily care if somebody else could benefit from something if it's not necessarily doing me any harm. That's my particular position on it. So I know some people have Paul's position as well. Debt-free debt. Based on my research, I think the law that the Higher Education Act, which is in the CARES Act, is based on economic trouble from the pandemic. I think 12 months ago was a better argument. Yes. So I think that was the roundabout way of, because President Trump declared a pandemic, and it was some provision that said that when we're in a state of war or a state of something, that you can enact the certain powers to do the forgiveness. So Biden kind of hopped on that like, oh, this is something that was already declared. But debt-free dad is saying that 12 months ago when we were kind of in the thick of it, that would have been a better argument. They may interpret it that way. They very may well do that. But the economic climate now is not due to the pandemic. It's due to inflation and federal policy to decrease wages. Yes, I would agree that the economic climate now, as opposed to the beginning of the pandemic, has changed. Inflation does play a part of it. And also corporate greed plays a part of it too, because I followed somebody on Instagram who basically says like, some of this part is inflation, some of it is corporate greed. One of these gas companies reported, people's argument a lot of times is like, oh, you see these gas prices, this is what's the problem with y'all voting for Biden? And they were saying like, gas prices are not high because of inflation. Truth be told, some of these gas companies have reported higher than normal profits in their last quarter. If it was a matter of inflation, these people would not be making bank off of people's backs and hiding under the guise of inflation, right? If you just reported record earnings, profit earnings, you're not suffering. These gas companies are not suffering. Yes, you can blame it on Biden or whatever you like to call it, but it also can be attributed to corporate greed. So yes, inflation is realistic, but let's also factor in other, like, let's facts be facts. That's how I feel about it. So debt-free dad. Paul, 91% of schools don't report the true cost of school on the financial aid disclosure. This leads to students not knowing the true cost and have to take more loans, per a new Government Accountability Office report. That is true. So I think, like I said, I don't know when Paul went to school, and his argument is not a new one. A lot of the older generation have this argument, and the same argument is I bought a house too, and when I bought a house, it's times have changed, and it's not relative in the respect that, like, oh, you made less back in the day, and so your house costs less. Things have changed on both ends as far as people making more, things costing a lot more, not just a little bit more. So I don't think the argument is the same, but we welcome other opinions here as long as they're respectful. We welcome other perspectives. My personal perspective about the $10,000, this is the $10,000 loan up to $20,000. I think that as far as the injunction goes, I'm going to vote that they may find that the Eighth Circuit was correct in joining it, and it may turn into them meaning the Supreme Court asking for or arguments on the merits of the actual case. Although I don't think they necessarily want to get into the weeds of it, it may come down to it. And I think there is some criticism. Like I said, when it was first introduced, Biden was basically saying, like, my hands are tied. I can't forgive it on my own. Congress has to do it, right? He was saying that from the beginning because he personally thought himself that he didn't have the authority to forgive student loans. And then getting enough pressure, and I assume he got some, like I said, some legal research on the matter, and he's like, aha, I found a way to do it for y'all. Some people complain about even the $10,000, but he's like, I found a way for it to happen. 10,000 up to 20,000 if you have a Pell Grant. All right, you welcome. And he's trying to get everything in order, move things fast, and then these lawsuits start popping up like, we don't want y'all to benefit. And I think it's sometimes sad because while we were in the pandemic, we had the PPP loans. People were issued. If you had companies, you had PPP loans that were issued, and a lot of the PPP loans were forgiven, right? These are companies that are not, needing for much, and they had their loans forgiven, right? It was an influx of making sure businesses stayed afloat in the economy, and even some businesses went belly up during the pandemic because they couldn't survive it. So the PPP loans were designed to keep businesses afloat, and they even had the loans forgiven later. And then those are way more than $10,000. And people, this is how I feel about it. You got some nerve to be worried about whether people get $10,000 forgiven, and people have hundreds of thousands of dollars forgiven in PPP loans, including some members of Congress. And you're worried about, you think it's undeserving for these people to get $10,000 up to $20,000 in student loans forgiven. I think personally that's whack. And I don't think whack is not a legal argument. I just think, as far as morally speaking, people draw the line in different places. Granted, Congress passed this PPP loan, I believe. I'll have to look into that. And that's, Congress has authority to, issue acts and laws about spending of federal money. But in essence, it still benefited people. And people's argument with the student loan forgiveness is like, oh, it's designed for people who don't really need it. If anybody doesn't really need it, let's talk about the people who had their loans forgiven through PPP. So that's how I feel about it. Let me see what else you got to say in the comment section. I didn't have it or didn't need it, so y'all shouldn't get it. I understand, but it costs taxpayers more to forgive the people. Oh, I didn't see your comment before I started on my little rant. But it costs taxpayers more to forgive the PPP loans than all of our congressmen. Okay, so yeah, Marcus is on the same tip as me. I didn't see his comment before that. So, we already talked about that. Biden, happy that this is getting challenged. He hopes it goes until 2024 so he can blame the other side. Smart political move. That may also play into it. In essence, sometimes, so I don't know, is one of the two, right? In essence, he might I don't know if that was legal, but we're going to find out through the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has found things illegal in the past. even if they've done executive orders, let's say if Biden did an executive order on his own accord and made it forgiveness that way, Supreme Court has invalidated executive orders of previous presidents in the past. Sometimes people put things out there just to get a challenge, just so that it's on the books, so that people say, okay, nobody else is saying nothing more about it. The Supreme Court has spoken. Or it's just like, we about to see what's going to happen, and we hope it gets, worked out. I don't know which one is the case with this particular one, but I know Biden was definitely questioning it up until August. Like, I don't know, y'all. I don't think I can do this. Y'all, who says I can? Even Nancy Pelosi, who was the previous minority leader in Congress, was like, he doesn't have the authority. He can postpone loans. He can stop interest or something, but he doesn't have the authority to forgive. And then bam, he does the forgiveness. So it's like, did y'all talk to each other before y'all came out here making these statements? Because now y'all acting like, and he's, like I said, he's doing his authority under Congress's authority to Department of Education, and Department of Education is under the purview of the executive branch. But here we are debating exactly the problem that he told people originally that he didn't have the power to do. So we'll see what ends up happening. Pocket watch it. People have interesting perspectives on that, and like I said, we welcome different opinions as long as they're respectful, and like I said, different opinions. I don't have to agree with you, but I'm open to hearing what you say and debating it. Just want to make sure that I didn't forget anything, because I wanted to hop on here real quick. So we'll see in February. The Supreme Court has basically asked people to submit written argument on the matter. It's going to be people in here doing all kind of amicus briefs, I'm sure, to say friend of the court briefs, basically saying like, this is what you guys should consider when you're making the decision about the matter. So it'll be interesting to see who hops in and does it. But I know people were very excited, because this stood between them having no loans and having loans, and it made a big difference for some people. So I'm sure people are bated breath trying to figure out if this is going to happen, because they had already submitted, and like I said, 36 million people had already, asked for forgiveness. So we'll see what ends up happening. Comment if you were one of those people, and comment. I'm sure you make sure this happens. But like I said, I hope y'all also voted in the midterm elections. These things matter when you're voting on judges, voting on local members, voting on governors. These are the people, attorney generals. These are the people that were actually, moving for these lawsuits. And unfortunately, I believe I'm one of those states in Texas that was part of the shenanigans. So also be careful where you decide to live. So that's all I had to say about the matter. We'll see what happens. I'm going to keep you guys updated on what's going on. At least you guys have another break about student loan payments. Hopefully you're doing productive things with the money. If there's additional money, you're maybe investing it, paying things down. Some people are taking vacations. That's too, everything doesn't have to be all work every time. So no judgment here. But we'll see what happens in the upcoming months. We're going to try to do another video before the month is over. Thank you guys for hanging out with us in 2022. And hopefully we'll see some new content from us in 2023. We'll do a poll to see kind of what you want to see from us. So if this is your first time joining in, consider subscribing to our channel. What you got to say, Marcus? I don't agree that people don't deserve it. We paying for someone who spent 6 years on academic probation and never graduated, but they spent our money everywhere. Let's pay for people who had a 3.0 GPA. Well, yes. Yes, Marcus, you do have a point that it does benefit the broad amount of people. That is bound to happen. I guess you can't cherry pick. You could say like submit your transcript to make sure you was really passing, but then you might have reasons why they weren't passing. They were supporting their family and they barely could keep up with their grades because they were holding down the whole household and they were 19 years. Like, everybody gonna have a story to tell. So truth be told, I don't know if they can really specify those particular things in regards to saying about loan forgiveness, but if you did public service loan forgiveness, that's not on the chopper right now. As I mentioned before in my other videos, if you work for the government or nonprofit, you can have all your loans forgiven up, after 10 years of payments, and that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Check that out, because that's not on the chopping board. And you just got to work for a government. That could be local, state, federal. and a nonprofit, and you can have a nonprofit 501c3. So that's not on the chopping block, and that can get more than $10,000 forgiven if this ends up turning out to not be something that will get approved by the government. Paul, okay, I'm not against anyone wanting the help. I'm against Biden having the authority to distribute this money. Same as Biden sending money to Ukraine. Take care of home first. If this administration did, no problem. Okay, so Paul's issue is how money is being spent. And like I said, Biden bases authority to spend the money on Congress's authority to Department of Education. Paul's gripe also lands with how Biden is spending the money in Ukraine. That is one of the executive powers. I had something before, like a list of things that shows like what president can and president cannot do. Let me see if I can bring cannot do, because there's, like I said, enumerated issues. Then there's also, things that are almost implied. Here it is. I'm going to share the screen with you guys. Here it is. Keeping the balance. What a president can and can't do. Harry Truman Library. A president can make treaties with approval, veto bills and sign bills, represent our nation in talks with foreign countries, enforce the laws that Congress passes, act as commander-in-chief during a war, call out troops to protect our nation, make suggestions about how things should be new laws, lead his political party, entertain foreign guests, recognize foreign countries, grant pardons, nominate cabinet ministers and Supreme Court justices, appoint ambassadors, talk directly to the people about problems, represent the best interests of all people. A president cannot make laws, declare war, decide how federal money will be spent, interpret laws, choose cabinet members or Supreme Court justices without Senate approval. So these are the do's and don'ts of it. And this is what I was talking earlier, if you're just hopping on, that, there are three branches of the government: legislative, executive, and judicial. And the president is obviously part of the executive branch. This is kind of a abbreviated list of what the president can and cannot do. On here, it says decide how federal money will be spent. That is under the purview of the legislative branch. But there, like I said, there's some things that are not enumerated, because the president does have executive order powers and can issue executive orders regarding certain things. And that's tied into his presidential powers. I don't know what that falls under, but it exactly is not listed that says like presidents can issue executive orders. So that's the difference. But I do want to, I am aware about the separation of powers and the reasons for it. And I do believe there should be separation of powers, and that no branch should exceed their authority. And it should be accomplished legally, as a lawyer myself. So that's how I feel about it. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope to see you in the next video. And thank you, Paul Rhines and Debt Free Dad, for chiming in on the chat today. All right, we'll see you in the next video.